Hi, everyone. This is Khristee Rich, and this is Holistic Me TV. This is a brand new show on YouTube to empower women around the world with their health and wellness. I am interviewing health experts from all around the world to educate you, inspire you, and to empower you. And don't forget, before I forget, go ahead and click on subscribe. So click on subscribe, and then you will be able to watch all of these amazing guests for this season and beyond. So go ahead and subscribe now to the channel. You will receive an email notification when a new episode is released. So a little bit about me. Again, I am Khristee Rich. I am a holistic health expert. I have also been a holistic healer for over 18 years. And I help to empower women with their health and wellness by helping them to overcome chronic conditions, chronic illnesses, and trauma through a holistic perspective. So that means getting to the root cause and treating it mind, body, and spirit, and then recommending natural ways and natural remedies to heal. And today I am very happy to bring on our guest from New York City. I love New York. And today we are going to talk about voice dialogue. So you may have seen in the previous episode with Kashana Evans, she briefly spoke about voice dialogue. But now we have Bridgit who will go in much deeper and answer more of your questions. So let me read her bio and introduce you to her today. So Bridgit Dengel Gaspard is author of The Final Eighth, Enlist Your Inner Selves to Accomplish Your Goals. She is also a senior trainer and founder of the New York Voice Dialogue Institute, a psychotherapist and creativity coach who has led professional workshops at Omega Institute, New York Open Center, Columbia University, NYU, the Actors Fund, and more. While she was pursuing a career in acting and comedy, she discovered voice dialogue, developed by the doctors Hal and Sidra Stone, who would become Bridget's mentors. She loves helping people discover they are so much more than they dreamt possible and reach their potential. Beautiful. Welcome, Bridget. How are you today?
Oh, wonderful, Khristee. Thanks for having me. I'm thrilled to be here. I love talking voice dialogue.
Oh, and we have so much in common. So, where to begin? We have so much in common. You heard her bio, everyone, so you know that she is, or she has been in the comedy world, the performing arts world, the acting world. That's also my background as well. So, we are going to get more into her story now. So, Bridget, can you tell a little bit about your story, your background, and why you decided to do the work that you do today?
Well, in high school, I said, I'm going to be a therapist or an actress. And so I ended up doing both. But so I pursued performing in New York City. I was a stand-up comic,
Oh,
and I know you were in comedy too, and I can't
yes, I
wait
did
to hear
stand
more.
up as well. And
Oh,
actually, that was similar to me too. I was thinking about being a therapist or an actress as well. We have too much in common. I I
wow.
love psychology. In high school, I really got into Jung and Freud, and I was just mesmerized. I was like, this is a beautiful field to study. So please don't let me
Oh,
stop you. Go on, tell your
no.
story. Again, we have
I
so much in
so
common.
agree. And we talked about it a little bit earlier that also I think the thing about psychology is it's story, right?
Yes.
Performing a story, stand up is story. And now I think a lot of the world is catching on because you hear about the narrative and all of that is more in mainstream discussion. Like you need to share a story. But I think you and I were obviously fascinated by story and we still are.
Yes.
The other thing about story, and I think this is what intrigued me, was what you didn't hear, what you didn't see, but you knew like this behavior and these like philosophies, they're not matching. And so part of my comedy was always about bringing up opposites, including like when I don't know, you project that someone of a certain status or like loves their designer clothes, you kind of assume maybe they're superficial. And so in my comedy I used to do this whole bit that the meanest people in the room at a party were often the hippie chicks, who were the ones that were supposedly embracing love and women empowering women, and then they'd make fun of the perfectly manicured girl there, or lady, woman, whatever you want to say at that time. And that
That's
person was
fun.
much more doing the volunteer work, really like putting their money where their mouth is, so to speak. And so I
That's
love
funny
the
because I'm a hippie girl. I'm a complete hippie girl.
and do
And
you agree? Hippie girls can be mean.
well, I don't know that. I just know that we see things in a different way, and we do see sometimes, how materialistic other people are, and we find that to be interesting and kind of funny. So it's funny that then you're flipping it on its head and making fun of the hippie girls. So I think that's brilliant. That's wonderful. It's very interesting to study psychology and to understand why people do what they do. That's why I've always been fascinated by that, and
Yeah,
that's why I got into acting myself.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so you were in this world for a while with comedy, doing improv. We also have that in common as well. I love that. And so, how did this lead you into discovering voice dialogue?
So it was again synchronicity, kind of how we met. Um,
Yes.
I happened to be reading Healing the Shame That Binds You, which is a book by John Bradshaw. I recommend it to everyone, even to this day. It's a classic. He has passed away, but how he digs into shame and healing from it is just extraordinary. And at the
Mm,
end of his book, he had a bunch of modalities that he recommended. He's like, you could do this or that. And voice dialogue was one of the modalities. And he would write maybe 3 or 4 pages describing it. Well, when I read that description of voice dialogue, like my intuitive selves literally were electrified. And I'm like, I have to hunt these people down, which meant I had to get their 800 number and call them. And that's what I did. And that's the doctors Hal and Sidra Stone. They became my mentors. They developed voice dialogue since the 1970s. And it's healthy. And you'll appreciate this, Khristee. A healthy personality consists of many different selves. We think of schizophrenia, and that's an unfortunate, very painful diagnosis. However, there's such a thing as polyphrenia, which is poly, like lots of cells. And creativity, you've got to have access to your different cells in terms of healing. So I just jumped in and I got facilitated myself, and then I got into the training. I watched people get so much better so quickly. It was breathtaking that I
mm,
actually became a bit bored of acting and even stand up, which I never would have predicted. But compared to the fascinating explorations, because you let the cells go where they want. And the thing about voice dialogue, you always go back to center because it's about being connected and also empowering yourself. Like, is it good to have a perfectionist here? Yeah, sometimes if you have high standards, but that perfectionist, if you let it run your life, will just make your life smaller and smaller because yeah, you're going to have to tolerate making mistakes if you are going to grow your business or your fitness goals, whatever it is.
hmm.
And so that's when I decided, wow. Oh, and another thing in terms of humor, but I didn't want to give up humor. And I thought, well, maybe I should go back to school to become a therapist. And I wrestled with that for a year or two. Then I had this synchronicitous, AKA random. I sat down at a New Year's Eve party, which I usually go to. So I know these people well. And I sat down next to this one woman who I've just basically know socially. And she said, how are you? And I said, well, I'm wrestling with this. And she said, well, you can do both, just like that. You
Yeah.
can do humor and healing. And there was something about, I had divided it into some like either or.
Yeah.
And within months, I was going to Columbia University in the School of Social Work for my master's, which was the quickest way to become a psychotherapist in New York State. And
Mm, and
I
great
mean,
school.
I'll never forget that moment because she was an MD and she said, I work with a psychologist and he actually, that's his title, like health and humor. And I'm like, great.
Well, I think this is important for the audience to hear because I went through the same thing too, because I didn't want to give up comedy either. So, as an actress, I played these comedic characters because, again, they were fun, they were juicy. I loved making the audience laugh. And then I did stand up and then, just continued comedy that way with my business became a comedy business, but I didn't want to give that up, but yet I wanted to help women. I wanted to empower them with their health and wellness and teach them they could overcome their chronic conditions and chronic illness like I did. So I was torn between these two worlds. And I was only doing one or the other. I was either doing the comedy or I was doing helping women with their health. But then again, like you said, one day somebody's like, well, you can do it all. You're everything. You're more than just one thing. And that's important for people to know. You can be multi-passionate and figure out how to merge your talents together to form what is right for you, not what you necessarily see other people doing in society.
And isn't that freeing?
So freeing, so beautiful, so freeing. Yes, we have so much in common, so much in common. Beautiful. So let's go back into talking about voice dialogue. You talked a little bit about it. Can you describe more what it is? You talked about these different selves, what happens in a voice dialogue session, and who is it for?
So voice dialogue is really for anybody as long as you can come back to center, that you do have ego strength that's strong enough to recognize, like we talked about, that you're a separate part here, but it's all part of a whole. And so with voice dialogue, one of the other great things about it is it's very somatic and physiologically based. So we say voice dialogue, and we think of words with dialogue, but it's not limited to words at all. So is it okay if I just get up and I kind of show you
Yeah,
things?
show
All
us,
right. So
show
in
us.
this session, you would start in center, and then let's say I go to a different self. Do you want to call a self out, Khristee? What self should I be over here?
Perfectionist.
Perfectionist. So let's say I go here, right? So now I'm the perfectionist, and I actually speak from the I as the perfectionist, and then I refer to Bridgit in the third person. And they have done empirical studies how this really helps integrate these different parts of us to separate the third person and the first person. So
Mm-hmm.
as the perfectionist in voice dialogue, unlike other techniques, I can say, I love perfectionists, what rules Bridgit should live by, what rules the world should follow. I'm allowed to have whatever physicality I need. And let's say with perfectionist, I'm probably more rigid, I'm more contained. All
Yes.
of that's good. And voice dialogue lets me be me. Nobody's going to ever ask me, Bridgit's perfectionist, how to be a little sloppier. So then you come back to center and you process that self in center. And there's a whole bunch of questions that can be asked, like, what are your early memories? What's your history? What's your role? So you really find out the gift. You're never out to eradicate a self. You can't. So just give that up, right? Try to kick your inner critic to the curb. Doesn't.
It's not going to work.
No, thank you. The inner critic says, no, I'll be back. So then here, it's almost a detox. Let's say I didn't like my perfectionist that much. I now have a compassionate, contemporary relationship with this self. And then I can do a homeopathic dose. Do I need my perfectionist a bit when I'm writing? Damn straight. I don't want lazy writing. And now we have values in common. I care about my writing. I want my writing to be very clean and clear. Everyone has different styles. That's mine. My perfectionist can actually help me. If my perfectionist won't allow me to put anything out for public review because it's too scared, it's not perfect enough, that's when it moves, I think, into not being good,
Yes.
unhealthy ways of
Yes.
this. And I get more control. Bring her in when I need her. She happens to be a she. We all have different gendered selves, and including non-gendered selves.
Hmm.
So then we go to a different self on this side. So what should I be over here?
A hippie, of course.
Oh la la, I'm gonna be your hippie. So now even notice my language, right? And body language. And also I probably speak down here where the perfectionist probably spoke more up here. All of this is natural, Khristee. Everything we're talking about, there's nothing abnormal. And so the hippie's like, just relax. If you want to express yourself, why don't you just express yourself? You don't need all that curating over there, or whatever my opinion is. No one's going to ask me to be a little more constrained. And besides that, Bridgit should do X, Y, and Z. And oh my God, does she want to be die saying she didn't do anything fun? I can't have that. And here's the other thing, Khristee, all of our selves, whether it's the hippie chick or perfectionist over there, we are so connected to Bridgit's vulnerability, or whoever it is, and reason for living. That's the other thing. So I might be the hippie chick and someone could project something on me, but inside I'm like, Bridgit's going to live this life. She was born here. Like, that's my passion. And the perfectionist would be, Bridgit's not going to be insulted and rejected. She's going to do it perfectly, and then she'll be fine. Now I'm going to come back to center, which is what we do. Now we can talk about their relationship and how they're both very important to me. They both believe their way is the highway. And from here, I get to say, that's a nice highway. I'll ride it for a bit. Now I'm, and this too. And how could my perfectionist help my hippie? Which I'm just joking, because they are not, there's no obligation that any self in voice dialogue has to help another self. It's my job here in center. But I just had this idea that if I went for Halloween as a hippie chick, my perfectionist could help. Like, you look too good. No. We need to, like, where's your bell bottoms or something like that. So there are even ways, though, that they could align. Again, the idea you have is you have more conscious choice. I always say voice dialogue has a rather boring like overview, because that's it, just more conscious choice. But if you have more conscious choice connected to your higher purpose, your higher health, you just have more energy, more joie de vivre. And especially like with diagnoses, then you get a self given to you. That's the other thing about selves. So say I'm fine and then I'm not fine and I get a
Before we go into health
okay.
diagnosis, I want to ask some
Okay.
questions just to make sure the audience
Oh,
understands, make sure I
okay.
understand as
Yes.
well. Because again, this is new for a lot of people. I had
Okay.
never heard of voice dialogue before Kashana came on and she spoke about voice dialogue. And I was so happy that you agreed to come on so that we could go deeper. So, for instance, say I'm in a session with you and we're doing
Okay.
voice dialogue. So I would then pick a self like I did with you. I would pick perfectionist and then I would act out that self and express how that self felt and what the needs were or wants were of that self. Is that correct?
With a little tweak, you would go to a different place and you wouldn't act out like role play. I'm glad you're bringing this up. This is not role play. So it's more you would embody that self, and act out might mean embodiment to you, but in terms of the audience, this is not role play. It's not, well, how do I think perfectionists are? It's you with your embodied perfectionist speaking from its point of view.
Okay. Okay. And then I would embody another self and then I would come back to center and then I as me would analyze those selves and understand what they wanted, what they needed, and then that would help me to understand maybe why I struggled with something, maybe why I wasn't in balance, etc. Is that
Correct.
correct?
Yes. 100% yes.
Okay. And then what is the purpose of the self? So is the purpose is that they want to help us, they want to protect us, but within their own sphere of expertise, understanding?
So the purpose of every single self, even if its function has become dysfunctional, like its behavior has to stop, every single self has the noble purpose of protecting our vulnerability and trying to avoid abandonment, which, as we know, babies that are abandoned they die. And so I'll just be blunt, because the thing is, every one of ourselves is underneath at their root, they're really about you being okay. So yes, but let's say you have a dysfunctional self, maybe, and by that I mean is unhealthy for you. And as a therapist, I've seen many versions like self-injury, of course, substance
Mm,
dependence, all of
mm,
those things. Then the self-injury has to stop, but we find out what that part carries. And I bet you there's trauma. So a lot of work also includes grief. Like, yeah, that happened. And this might be a little controversial, Khristee, but I stand by it. I will never tell a self like get over it or something. I think we have selves that know our early stories, and I want them honored. They can't dictate that the rest of your life that you're doomed to be a victim, let's just say. But those little ones in you that remember the bad times, if there were, they will be honored and held as any child should have been. Like, that's a terrible thing that happened, and that kind of thing. So we love
mm,
ourselves. The dysfunctional behavior has to stop, but
mm.
not the ferocious protection of all of ourselves.
Okay, I have a few more questions. So, do these selves originate when we are young as a child, or sometimes do we develop more selves later on?
Both. I like to say we have selves plasticity, because we do. But they start as, so we're born infant, we're born completely vulnerable. And most people think of vulnerable as like open to attack, but voice dialogue looks at that word as, yes, that can be a part of it, but it's more like being undefended and open to the world in a beautiful way. I mean,
Hmm.
that's what a little itty bitty baby is, and we love them and they're cute and they're just like open. And
Yeah.
so then when we say
Open and curious.
vulnerability, open and curious, like, oh, what's that? Oh, and so it's seeds of ourselves are that young. So depends on the house we are brought into, the gender, the birth order, all of those things you'll read about in psychology magazines, which are important, are also included in voice dialogue. Because however it is politically, different households have different expectations for different genders. An
Hmm.
older child is expected to do X and a younger child is expected to do Y. So
Yeah.
all of those things are put onto the infant. And so let's say we have this infant has an anxious mother who wants to do well, but is anxious. And so if this infant starts to cry because it needs food or to get dry, and the baby can sense energetically that that crying is bringing anxiety, even if it's, again, all towards, no one has to do anything wrong, then that baby will start to coo first. Even if its instinct is, I'm wet, they'll have learned and they'll go, hello, and then happy mom will come and take care of the situation. And we would say those are the seeds of different selves where people start to realize, okay, these parts of me are welcome in this household. Again, it's not conscious. And those we call primary selves. It's the cells we lead with. And again, it goes back ancestrally for a lot of people. And it's one of the reasons problems can feel insurmountable, because these cells come in before language. So just talk
Mhm.
therapy, it doesn't get, it's still below where language was. And one of the things about the somatic aspect of voice dialogue, because you go there, sometimes I've gone to inner children, Khristee, we don't talk.
I was just about to say, yeah, sometimes you would just move and feel what that persona feels instead of have language.
And then when you go back to center, you have language so that, again, you can anchor the experience in your contemporary times.
Got
So,
it. Got it.
those early selves, also the selves that are disowned, happen around that time. So like, the scolding or even just a annoyed look can be enough to say, okay, that's not welcome
Yeah.
here.
Okay, I have so many questions. You're bringing up so many things. So let's go back to the selves. And you said sometimes there is dysfunction. So, one, do you believe that every self has a purpose and has a gift? And do you believe that sometimes maybe one self becomes too dominant and does too much, and the other selves don't have enough of a voice, have enough of a say, and that causes the dysfunction? Or what do you believe is the dysfunction?
Yes. I think you hit, I love yes to everything you just said. Again, every self has a gift, period. That's how voice dialogue thinks. But they also have a sting. And then the dysfunction can be because different selves have been reinforced. And that is indeed where a lot of problems come in. So, like a self that's just taken over and really limited someone's ability to function in the way they want to, like a higher goal, then yeah. So, we meet those selves not as the enemy, but as like a mystery. Like, okay, self, the procrastinator, the writer here really wants to be prolific, and maybe the doer back there actually has all these things written. So as I've talked about with you before, like the final eighth, often people have a lot of stuff, but then the critic comes in. Now, what I also get into in the book, as you know, is the core negative belief. So if we have core negative beliefs, then different parts of us hold those to be true. So if you're
And
in
let
a
me
place
take you
where you,
back again because you talk about so many different things. I want to
okay,
make sure the
sorry,
audience understands.
yes.
Um, so let's talk about the book and then let's go back into voice dialogue. So, what is the final eighth?
So
What
the
does that
final
mean?
eighth, oh,
Final eighth, the title of your book. What does that mean?
so the final eighth came to me like a download in the middle of my private practice. And I suddenly realized the final eighth is a thing. And it's when people get 7/8 of the way there. These are for dedicated, talented, people who have really worked hard, they can practically see their finish line and they suddenly stall and they don't know why. And as their therapist and creativity coach, I didn't understand it either. I'm like, what's going on here? And the
Yes.
final eighth, and that's when you have some selves who do not want the goal in a tug of war with the selves that do. And these selves that do not want the goal, they're the one holding you up, but not in a bad way. They, instead of being the problem, they are the way out of the problem. So voice dialogue is you talk to them, not like, this, but more like, okay, what's going on? Procrastinator, or even this is where like party girl comes in. It's like, oh, you had your third call back and you chose to go out the night before and get a little bit drunk. Like and then of course blow your third callback that you worked so hard for, or the meeting with the bank manager. Because the other thing, Khristee, is that it wasn't related to my people who are in creative fields. This was a marketer for a bank. This was a corporate lawyer. This
Yes.
final eighth issue is everywhere.
Yes. And again, I want to star this because I think this is so important for people to understand. Let me get one quick sip of water.
I'll join you.
Water is so important, everyone. Keep yourself hydrated. Cheers. Okay. So this is so important because there are so many people who work so hard. And as you mentioned, not just the creatives, entrepreneurs, business owners, marketers, etc. And they are putting in the hours, they are putting in the time, they are putting in the dedication. They do have the intention to be very successful with whatever their goal is, and they're not achieving it. Okay, so probably there are some people watching this episode going, yes, that's me. I've been working so hard to get my book out there. I've been working so hard to get my marriage together. I've been working so hard, whatever it is, and it's not getting to where you wish it to go. And I think it's very important, this concept, and for people to understand, because in the coaching world, there is so much about you've got to work harder, you've got to be really committed. If you're not achieving what you want, enough money or success, whatever it is, it's because you have failed. You haven't put in enough time, enough effort, enough sacrifice, some people say. And this is very detrimental for people to hear because they are trying hard and you don't want them to burn out. You don't want them to have a nervous breakdown and you don't want them to feel it's all their fault. Right? So they keep on going to coaches, keep on spending a lot of money and still not getting to where they wish to go. And the coach is saying, you just follow my formula. If you do what I do, then you'll be successful like me. And that's not true. So what you're saying is very different, is saying that this is a common phenomenon that a lot of people go through and is not being talked about. And it's just understanding that there's different selves inside of you that want different things. And even though you think you want this goal and this is in alignment, there's other parts of you that say, no, I'm scared of that happening, or no, that's not safe, or no, I want something else. So then when we are conscious of these selves, then we can possibly create change or see it in a different point of view. Is that correct?
Completely correct, Khristee. Yeah. And listening to you say that, it's like I feel the sadness of like um the tragedy really of being stuck in that place for so long and then blaming yourself. And that's where I go to the core negative beliefs. Then you start to believe all the negative beliefs that you hold or that different parts of you hold. And it's not true.
Yeah, or other
It's
people
just what.
blaming you too. So it's not just you blaming yourself, but other people are like, you're lazy, you're not working hard enough. Why can't you be like your sister? People get this stuff all the time, and it's not
Mm.
fair because we're all individuals. And again, we need to know ourselves, to understand ourselves.
And also, uh, yes, and to what you just said, society has no respect for what I call success issues. The final eighth is actually a success issue because it reflects seven-eighths of success. And so we're supposed to just have this clean, unambivalent relationship with success. And we don't, most of us. And there are people that do, and that's great. Great. Not everyone has a final eighth issue. They don't, but a lot of us do. And so
Yeah.
the
And,
idea
and
that,
who are the people who do? Would you say that they are normally labeled as underachievers or those who self-sabotage themselves? These are, again, terms that people hear a lot.
yeah, I've really been keying into the term self sabotage lately. I would say underachievers, not necessarily, because this really is for people who are achievers and it's not working out. So with
And
voice
I
dialogue,
just want to emphasize this because for a long time I actually misunderstood what underachiever means. I always thought that an overachiever was someone who has big goals and they go for these big goals and they may be bigger than most people would think they could ever accomplish, but they go for them because they have so much ambition and drive. And I thought underachiever was someone who didn't have the goals, that they weren't really thinking as big, so they wouldn't go for those goals. But then someone recently told me that they were an underachiever, and my jaw dropped because I didn't think of this person as an underachiever. And he said that he has big goals and he never achieves them. So he's an underachiever. And so I think it's important for people to understand what an underachiever is. But I think a lot of people are not, again, reaching those goals. So they're underachieving what they wish to achieve.
and I agree with that completely. And I was going to say too, with voice dialogue, you'd go to those parts that say, let's keep our goals small, and we'd listen and we'd learn why. Because the truth is success is a scary terrain for a lot of people, and correctly. And so yeah, and thanks for going over that with the underachievement. And the other thing, and I have a whole chapter in my book about don't achieve, because I realized, oh, this book can't be for just our type A personalities. And so I have an entire chapter devoted to let it go. Is it an outgrown goal? Is it for your mom and not for you? There's,
Mm.
and a lot of times people hold on to old goals to kind of avoid the emotions of having to let that go, because it's often a grief process, and they say to themselves, what do I want now?
Yeah.
And so I'm glad you talked about that, because sometimes people do hide behind the underachievement in order to like uh, thwart the bigger, more fuller expression of themselves.
This is an interesting point because I think there's a lot of people that look around society and they're like, okay, I should be married by a certain age, and then I should have two children, I should have a dog, and I should live in a house. And some women may not want to be mothers, but then they just feel that society is saying that they should be a career woman and be a mother, and they don't really want it. So then they may have fertility issues, and it may be, like you said, these selves saying, we don't really want you to have a baby, we want you to focus on your career. And so it's a different way of thinking. Of course, there are many issues, many reasons why someone could be having fertility issues, but this could be one of the issues. Okay, so I have a few more questions I want to get in because we're almost out of time. So let's go back to these selves. And first of all, I want to clarify, how is this different from multiple personalities? So people may have heard about multiple personalities. How is this different?
And by that, you mean multiple personality disorder, which is,
Yeah, for those who normally have had a lot of abuse and then they have these
yeah.
personalities and then they come up later. How is
Yeah,
this
and
different?
I think it's also called dissociative identity disorder now too. And I'm
Okay.
glad you bring that up, because people still have that fear. So that's different. Someone who has multiple personality disorder or dissociative identity disorder have trauma history, terrible, terrible trauma history. And we humans are so amazing that the parts of them that took the trauma, they don't have access to, they can't come to center that I keep talking about. So like they might just lose a Tuesday because some other self that they're unaware of comes out. Voice dialogue is not for them, at least not right away, until there's direct trauma work with someone who's really, I think, has to have a lot of experience and training in that, so that that person can feel okay to be in center. And then you could do possibly voice dialogue after that. But that is a diagnosable illness, and it's about having parts that they have no idea about. And voice dialogue, it's the opposite. We want you to have ideas about it. We also absolutely want you to come back to center, because it's about me. Even if like I have my wild child, and Khristee, I do, and my wild child in its wild child heyday would do amazing things that maybe were considered dangerous to some, but I always knew what she was doing. Like I always could pull her in. I had the ability to. And often with people with that illness, they don't have the ability. It's not that they don't want to, but they literally don't have this psychological ability to pull that in and go to a different self. And that's the
So,
work that has to be done, which is not voice dialogue.
so let me ask you, You said for this disorder that people have had severe trauma and they're not able to regulate themselves and come to center. But yet sometimes, everyone experiences trauma in some form during their life, and not necessarily big T trauma, such as developing this condition. But could it be, just wondering, imagining, could it be that with people who have this disorder, they have had such heavy trauma that these selves that we normally have tried to cope in a way to tolerate what they experienced, versus if we did not have that severe of a trauma, we still have similar selves, but they're not um, similar because, again, they're not trying to cope to heal from that experience. Could that possibly be why
I
it's so
think
drastic?
that's absolutely what it is. I think you nailed it. And that's why, to be honest, as a coach and a therapist, separate again from the very, very terrible trauma that makes people, well, sorry, two things. One is, thank goodness for humans, even those with horrific trauma, there's still a part of us that just says, let's get a self to deal with this. And that self goes down the hallway and stays down there while you work on simply surviving. And then there's a thing about going from surviving to thriving. And this thriving after surviving can be really treacherous, which is why you need someone to be part of your healing team. I don't believe in one healer. I think people
Yes.
kind of need a
Yes.
bunch of healers.
Yes.
So there's that. And then, but this kind of scares some clients. So I'll just say it out loud, but I mean it. We have disassociative selves. I love a good disassociative self. But the difference is it's not disassociating in the same sense as like that like if it was me and I had DID, which I do not, that I don't know it's there. But I know I have a disassociative self. It's like, okay, it's the all good face. It's all good. It's not good, but I'm going to do this because what if I needed to get away from a predator? I need to have this disassociation. I'm just going to fake it till I can get to the phone or whatever it is. So I embrace disassociative self, grudge holder self, the one I'm going to hurt you first before you hurt me self, in terms of exploring. Now, if I'm going to hurt you first before you hurt me has too much airtime and you're getting fired and you can't afford to be, and it's really acting out in a way that's destructive for your overall life, we need to talk about the gift of that self and what does that self need, but it cannot lead anymore. And that self may have gotten you out of the survival mode, so we are forever grateful, but it may be the exact wrong self to start it when you're moving into thrival mode. So
Yes. Yes.
thank you for that. So then different cells at different developmental times are the ones that are primary. And then we talked earlier, so if I get a diagnosis, now I have a
Yes.
self that's brand new. But I also could have a self that's brand new, like the wise healer. Maybe I didn't need that before, but now I'm a member of a club I don't want to be a member of, as they say, but those are new selves that could come up at any time. And that's wonderful because along with that, you can have these amazing healer selves or problem solver
Mm.
selves because you've got to really solve bigger problems now. And then
Mm.
there's selves that are new all the time, like retirement. I work with people who are really thinking about retirement and they're like, I haven't played the piano for like decades, like, and they're like, oh, maybe I'll like bring back my piano player. And so I'll say, well, go get lessons now before you retire so you
Yeah.
can just start to play with these selves that are going to become more primary after you retire.
And these selves could even be to get you to access your talents. You may have talents that you have buried down, and they could be like, I want attention. I want you to pick up that violin again. This is your passion. This is your talent. This is what you should do. So let's go back to health, because I know that I had stopped you when you were in the flow about to talk about that, but I wanted to lead the audience through so that they understand what we're talking about. So, how does a diagnosis play into voice dialogue and these selves? So, again, throwing it out there, certain times do these selves kind of prohibit us from getting well, etc.? Can you give examples?
Absolutely. So also back to voice dialogue being a physiological, somatic, expressive modality. So whether you have a diagnosis, right, that it hits the body, or even if you're dealing with substance dependence, right? So if I
Mm.
have a party hardy girl and I love my champagne and I'm now on my fifth glass of champagne, it's going to affect my whole body regardless of what selves I'm in. So I think that's also important. So Then if we're dealing, say, with the illness of too much dependence on a substance or two, we would again get to the gift of that party hardy. And what does this champagne do? And we don't say too much champagne or whatever the substance is bad. We say, okay, what's the gift? What do you love about it? And then can you get the stuff you love about it, just not with champagne? So it's like we working with someone, I want for them what they want for themselves, but could we have a not so destructive means, since in terms of this example, you can't stop at one or two. So say
Yeah.
you get a diagnosis and whatever that is, but it's a physical illness, and there may be selves that didn't want to go to the doctor because they kind of knew you weren't going to get good news. So
Mm,
sometimes that diagnosis says, damn it, I knew I was right, which sometimes make people afraid of their intuitive selves, that they actually fear they're only going to get bad news from their intuitive selves. So voice dialogue helps them understand intuition works both ways. You're not doomed to just the negative. And then again, it's like, okay, this diagnosis, what does it mean? Can I have to have an information gatherer? I often say to my clients, okay, this is my professional opinion, and here's my professional and personal opinion. Like it or not, I don't think you can be passive about a diagnosis. I don't think the system, whatever it is for you, has enough knowledge. And I'm not even blaming people. People are taught to have very focused lenses. I'm an ophthalmologist, I'm a podiatrist. It's like, great, but I'm a whole person with feet, or whatever the problem is. So I think you have to start to have selves that are really able to ask. Also, many selves are like taught, don't ask for help, because that'll lead to bad things. You've
mm,
got to often have a part that is now able to ask for help, to admit being overwhelmed, that more like dealing with the vulnerable selves. And so the idea is that, and then also to the part that's like, yep, I actually enjoy being sick. Finally, people understand how hard life is for me.
yes.
There will be selves. And so with voice dialogue, just as non-judgmentally as we meet your wild healer from beyond, we will meet your like hunkered down, like, I'm tired of picking up after people. Now I get to rest, or whatever that self has to say. And then we're like, well, can you just rest without having to make it part of a negative story?
Mhm.
Not that your story is wrong, but how can you bring rest into your life without having to be ill? Is that possible? What does that self think? And again,
Yes.
coming to center, and people have great ahas like, oh my gosh, you know what? I realize, I'm making this up, but like someone might say, I realize all the women in my family, after they turned 45, every one of them got some kind of illness, and then they stopped doing housework. You get to see patterns you didn't even know
Yeah.
existed.
Yeah, and a lot of people have fears, such as if someone in their family, their parents, died at a certain age, and then they're like, oh, will I live past 59? Will I have the same heart attack? Will I have the same condition? So then again, these fears, these belief systems are ingrained in us, and we don't realize how they are affecting us, how they are limiting us. So this is very important for people to understand that substance abuse could be these selves trying to help us to cope. It can also be affecting our health and not getting the help that we need for our health. So you mentioned on the pre-call that also in voice dialogue, you can talk to symptoms. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So this, you would use the same technique, in the sense, like I said, you go to a self that has to go to somewhere else in the room, and you come back to center. So give me a body part, and I'll talk that one through. Which one should I?
Stomach.
You know what? I was totally gonna do that. Great. So then same as I'd go as my stomach, and you see I'm even now hooking into it, and then um go somewhere in the room. When I do body parts, usually they're on the floor. The person is on the floor. And even if it's Zoom, which it is these days for me, you could bring the laptop or whatever it is down to the floor. And then me as the facilitator, I might say, I'm here. I'm going to ask you a question or two. You're not obligated to answer. And then I might say, well, describe what you're feeling. Is it pulsating? Is it nausea? Is it that kind of stuff? And then I might say, do you want me to be quiet for a while? And often people do, because then they can start to key in. And again, like I said, I can be 20 minutes with a body part and not say anything verbally, but I'm very there energetically. And then notice, even now, I just took a deep breath. Often the breath changes. And these are things I'll notice as the facilitator. So when we get back to center, I'll say, well, I might say, you were incredibly pale. You lost all color when, or whatever it is. People
Mm-hmm.
will describe that something they got hot, almost feverish, and it'll be part of the conversation. And that self will often say, like, we never rest. I'm always on. Like that stomach might say, I
Right.
can't do it. I'm so anxious. We're doing 4 hours a day for like 2 weeks. I can't do it. And she hates me. Often these parts think that the person hates them because what is the type A behavior tells them, because also the negative thinking. If you can't do 4 hours of sleep a night and do this for like 6 years, something's wrong with you. And it's like, no, something is wrong with that expectation. I don't want a 4 hours of sleep life for 6 years at a time. That's
Right.
me personally.
Yeah, me neither. I need my sleep. So important. Yes. Yes. So this really interested me when I heard you talk about this because, again, I come from a background being a healer. I've been a healer for over 18 years, and I do Reiki and Russian shamanism. And I've created this beautiful special blend with the two of them. So I don't know anyone else that does the work that I do. And also, through the years, I developed other skills. So I became clairvoyant. I also became a medium. I also became clairsentient. And many people may think that mediums are only talking to loved ones who have passed, talking to the dead. But a medium is anyone who can communicate with the spiritual world, with the astral plane. And this may be archangels, this may be ancestors, this may be power animals, this may be past lives. This may be even going into your body, which I love to do, and talking to your organs to understand how your organs are feeling, what they need from you. And so I have gotten so much insight by talking to people's organs. Of course, I'm clairvoyant, so I can also see where there's inflammation. I could also see where there's fear because we hold emotions in our body too. And I remember a client, and I was talking to her stomach because she had digestive issues, and the stomach and the esophagus were upset with her. And they were saying, well, she keeps on pushing down all of her emotions, and I can't take it anymore. Would you tell her to just vocalize, just express herself instead of just pushing it all down onto me? And so this was very enlightening because she was thinking about, doing something that the doctor had recommended to do, but really it was realizing what she was doing to her body and not being conscious of it. So I think it's beautiful that you can talk to the symptom, you can talk to the organs in your session to get a different perspective. And I think that can be so helpful and so healing.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I'm very moved by that description because that's again freeing. And
Yeah.
it's coming back once again to center, but center, the way voice dialogue talks about it, which I'm not going to get in today, but there is a psycho-spiritual aspect where you do connect, and that these babies come in connected. We never lose the connection, but we lose access to that connection. And what you're
Mm,
talking about is bringing back access to the connection.
yes. Yes. Beautiful. Beautiful. Great. So talk a little bit about the work that you do with your clients. Who do you work with? Who comes to you for a session? What are some of the things they would like to focus on?
Such a good question. I'm like, how, it's very broad.
I know that you
um,
mentioned substance abuse or substance dependence, so that must be one of them.
yes, so I do what I call the garden variety reasons people come to psychotherapy, which is in no way invalidating that. So it's anxiety, depression, and substances
Mhm.
are a big part of it. Excuse me. The other part of it is transitions, whether it's
Yes.
getting a diagnosis, becoming a parent, becoming an empty nester,
Hmm.
retirement. And I tend to get people, because I really do believe, like, when you're out here a while, and it's my own private practice, it's like people that are right for you, you're right for them.
Yes.
So I have a lot of international clients who
Yes.
really live in different cultures and how to navigate that. And
And that's because you do work virtually.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But also because even before COVID, when I wasn't virtual, I'm in New York City.
Yeah.
So I have, and also I just love, I grew up in Harlem. I'm a traveler.
I'm a traveler too.
So yeah,
Yes.
so I'm open to it, to
Yeah.
whatever the it is. And so, but I probably, if I was going to pick one, and I think it's current too, it's anxiety. People are
Anxiety.
just
Yes.
anxious. And
People are
so we
so
should
anxious.
be, right? All of this terrible news, this ecological horror that's around us.
Yes.
What can we do? So that's, I would say, anxiety. And then we go to the different parts, like the anxiety, what I call the small story, like what's up in your life, but then the anxiety of the large story, like feeling hopeless and useless in terms of these terrible polluting things that are happening,
Yes.
the
Yes.
violence,
So
etc.
much going on in the world. Anxiety is a big one. I agree. A lot of people are struggling with anxiety, and a lot of people may not even define it as being the problem, as, being an anxious person. So it's very important for people to know that they can get help, that they can get support, that they can feel better. So again, I'll just repeat what you just said. So you help your clients with anxiety, depression, you help them with dependence on alcohol and other substances. And don't you also help them with creative blocks? Like
I
you
was
work
just
with
going
the
to say what I
creatives?
didn't mention.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, and then creative blocks obviously is a big one. I wrote my book because you write the book you need.
Yes.
So
Hold up your book so
certainly,
everyone can see it. It's a
oh, we'll
beautiful
do
book.
that.
It's got a
Yeah.
beautiful cover. I've got my copy here, The Final Eighth, everyone. Make sure you get it. And it's a nice read. It's not too long. It's very easy to read. So definitely check out The Final Eighth. And I'm sure you can get it wherever you normally purchase your books.
Yeah, and the idea being that people, again, back to the stuck points and their the final A stuck points and the creativity blocks. And I've had people, clients overall, some of them decided to completely switch gears and go a different route. So their creative block was saying you're done with this somehow, or it's like it's just not working. Your life and this creative goal aren't in alignment. And then the work becomes, well, what other selves and where do you go? And then the opposite, it's like, okay, kind of tweaking. And then it's like charge ahead.
Yeah.
So I really wrote this to be helpful and not goal oriented, so that if you're kind of wanting to figure out what the next step is, it's helpful. But if you're like, no, I know I want this goal, but something's off and working harder is not the solution. And it's a
Yeah.
solution Western civilization adores. It's like,
Yeah.
no, it's not that for most people. For
Yes.
most people,
Be
I would
gentle with yourself, everyone. You do not have to burn out to achieve your goal. And again, Western society is always about go harder, go more, work more hours, and it's not necessarily the way to achieve whatever you wish to achieve. So again, be gentle and to know yourself. So again, the creators of voice dialogue, what was it created for? What was the initial purpose for it?
Oh, that's such a good question. You're the first one to ask me that. They created it for their relationship. They were actually, so Hal and Sidra are their names. Hal is passed on of old age. Sidra is alive and well and still working in her mid 80s. So yay.
Good for her.
So they were each married for a second time. In other words, with each other. They each had had these first relationships that produced kids and they were long term and all of that. But for whatever reason, it didn't work out. Those guys met and they realized they were going to move towards divorce again.
Mm.
And it was Hal who had played with this idea. He was a Jungian analyst who, by
Oh,
the way, actually met Jung as
oh,
a
wow.
as a like a young man with hubris. He literally went to Vienna and met him in person. He's like, I'm studying
Wonderful.
Jungian analysis. So now we have one degree of separation from Jung himself.
Wow.
So,
I love
so
young.
he'd had this idea at another time in his life prior, but when he met Sidra, the two of them started working like, what's going on that we get into these negative bonding patterns? So much so, we're two people, we love each other, but we're going to be divorcing, just like we have each done separately. And that's how it started. And that's when they realized it wasn't a theoretical concept. Our inner children are real. Our saviors, they're real parts of ourselves. And the first self that they did, this quiet inner child of Sidra's came out, and she's a go-getter from Brooklyn. born and bred, right? So this was an absolutely disowned self for her. And this one was scared. And then they got more compassion, because that's a natural consequence of this work. You just have more compassion for your parts, but also for
Mm,
other people's parts, and you don't have to work for it. You will
mm,
never hear us saying you got to have compassion. No rules in voice dialogue. It's what do you want? So that's how to save their relationship. And then they felt they were gifted, that it was a download, and they kept working on it and bringing more people in it. And they realized you could literally, do voice dialogue once a week for your whole life and run into different selves. But
mm,
you'll see there are certain selves that keep coming back for reasons.
right.
But that's how, and we haven't even
Interesting.
touched on that, but it's enormously effective for two people to do this together, to
Interesting. So I
realize like,
didn't
what.
know that you could do that. I didn't know you could have a session with two people, for instance, a husband and wife who are struggling, and then they could work out their issues by identifying these selves inside. That's beautiful. That's really important for couples to know, because a lot of couples go to therapy and they keep on fighting and it's not getting anywhere and they're not getting more clarity. But I think voice dialogue really gives us clarity, really helps us to understand ourselves
Yeah, yeah.
much better. And that's what's so beautiful about it. And just briefly, you also mentioned a little bit about shadow selves. So I think it's important for people to know these disowned shadow selves that are part of us, and not to be afraid of them, but to be aware, to acknowledge them. And also, you mentioned how this can help with intergenerational healing. So that, for instance, I assume that we can develop these selves, but being passed down by issues that haven't been resolved in our lineage, with our parents, etc. So then we adopt this self that we may not even know about or understand, and it's still kind of calling the shots, affecting our lives. Is that true?
Absolutely true. 100%. It's really wonderful, but there are so many powerhouse women that are my clients, and then they run across their patriarchal inner patriarch that feels she's a failure because she
Mm.
didn't do the Cinderella route, and that self is serious. It's like shocking. And then they realize, wow, there are places I'm still holding myself back because I don't want to be the bad girl in the patriarchal frame. Yeah, it's really freeing, and it works invisibly until it becomes visible, and then you can do something about it.
And then you can heal your lineage. That's so beautiful. And stop passing down intergenerational trauma. Very, very
Yes,
powerful work that you do.
yes.
So please let the audience know how they can get in touch with you, how they can work with you. I know some of your offers. You do have a free course on Udemy, and that is a voice dialogue course that they can check out right away for free. And also, you do offer a chance to work with you as part of a free workshop once a month for voice dialogue. So, say a little bit about how they can get in touch with you, an email, link, etc.
So, yes. So, in terms of the book, for the full
Yes,
thing, my book
get
is
the book,
here. Yes. So,
The
you can just
Final Eighth.
final eighth. You can Google my name, any Dengel Gaspard. I'll come up. I'm on all the social media. But the two things you talked about, which is really important, Udemy is a platform that holds classes. And I love this work so much, Khristee, and feel that there should be no hampering to access. So it's totally free, and it is about 36 minutes, and it's a literal how-to. You can stop and start it so you can do your own sessions. And I also say to coaches, tell your clients, if you feel you have a client who could use this, go sign up. It's free. It's my gift to the
Yes,
world because
great
it's so
resource.
powerful.
Give it to everyone.
And then on third Thursdays of the month at 8 p.m. Eastern, my colleague Eric and I do a free on Zoom voice dialogue learning lab. And we do a session. So you get to literally see how a session works. We invite people come every month because you always learn something new, followed by a group exercise. So it's hands-on in the sense that you'll learn about your own inner selves, and you'll learn how the technique works. And whether you're doing it for yourself and or clients, depending on anything that you do, you could be a nurse working in the hospital system, and this will help you. So
Yes, voice
come,
dialogues for everyone.
it really is third Thursdays. So that's,
Okay.
whatever the third Thursday is, you don't have to know the date in advance. Just count down third Thursday of the month, 8 p.m. Eastern. And you can contact me, social media or email, final8 at final8.com, nyvoicedialogue at yahoo.com. I'm pretty findable. And if not,
Okay.
they can ask you, right, Khristee?
All of her links will be below, everyone. So just go to the description, check out all the links. I will be joining you for one of your free voice dialogue workshops, the third Thursday of the month. And also I'm going to check out that free class as well on Udemy. So everyone check out the free resources. Also reach out if you would like more support with Bridgit. But thank you so much, Bridgit, for being a guest today. I am sure the audience learned a lot about voice dialogue, and I'm sure it was new for many, as it was for me. So everyone watching, please give this video a like if you enjoyed it today. Please leave a comment. Let us know what you learned today. If you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the comments below. We will circle back and answer your questions for you. And don't forget to share this video so more people can learn about voice dialogue, so more people can learn about Bridgit's work and also her book. And also don't forget to subscribe. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button so that you can watch the whole season of all of these amazing guest experts from all around the world. And also don't forget to go back. Don't forget to go back to the old episodes and catch those as well. So subscribe, and then you will receive an email notification when the next episode is released. So again, thank you, Bridgit, for being a guest today on Holistic Me TV. Thank all of you for watching today, and I hope to see you on the next episode. Bye for now.